Welcome, dear listeners. I'm delighted to greet you on my channel. I present to you a new, captivating story. Enjoy listening. Natalia glanced in the rearview mirror, adjusted a few stray strands of hair, and sighed. Her day at the accounting firm had been absolutely insane. The quarterly report, a tax audit, the director's outburst, and then at home, her own set of troubles awaited. Inna Genadievna, her mother-in-law, had decided 2 weeks prior to visit her beloved son for a week, but had extended her stay indefinitely. Lately, the tension in their household had reached an unbearable peak. Inna Genadievna had discovered a plethora of flaws in her daughter-in-law's homemaking skills and didn't hesitate to comment on Natalia's every action. Yesterday, after a critique of her borscht, Natalia finally reached her limit and asked her mother-in-law to return home. Her husband, Sergei, remained silent at first, but later, in private, he unleashed a tirade on his wife. "How can you speak to my mother like that? She dedicated her entire life to me," he yelled. Natalia tried to explain that she loved his mother dearly, but they needed their own personal space. Natalia pulled up to their building and switched off the engine. Her gaze fell upon a bouquet of camomiles she had bought on the way. "We'll make up," she thought, feeling weary of the constant arguments. As she ascended to the 5th floor, she envisioned her evening. A calm conversation with her husband and mother-in-law, devoid of shouting or blame. Perhaps they could even agree on a specific departure date for Inna Genadievna. But upon reaching their apartment door, Natalia froze in disbelief. Her suitcases and several bags of belongings were piled by the entrance. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She fumbled for her keys, but the lock wouldn't budge. It had clearly been changed. Natalia pressed the doorbell. Silence. She pressed it again, longer this time. "Who is it?" Her husband's voice boomed from within. "Seryoga, it's me. It's me. Please open the door," Natalia urged, trying to keep her voice steady. A muffled whisper, then footsteps, were heard behind the door. "My mother doesn't want to live with you. Go to your parents," her husband roared through the door, so loudly that neighbors on lower floors likely heard him. Natalia stood stunned. What was happening? This was their apartment, purchased with a mortgage she contributed half her salary to, and Inna Genadievna was merely a guest. How could her husband do this? Her immediate impulse was to pound on the door, to scream, to demand entry, but Natalia suppressed the urge. "Calm down," she told herself. Hysterics wouldn't help. Instead, she silently walked to the electrical panel in the hallway, opened it, and decisively pulled out the breakers, plunging the apartment into darkness. In the pitch-black hallway, illuminated only by a dim light from a distant window, she leaned against the wall and waited. She knew they wouldn't last long inside without a flashlight or candles. Sergei had been terrified of the dark since childhood, and their phones were undoubtedly dead. He never bothered to check their battery levels. After 5 minutes, a key scraped in the lock. The door creaked open, and a bewildered Sergei appeared in the doorway, a lighter in his hand. "What kind of joke is this? Turn on the light," he hissed. Natalia looked at him silently, then at Inna Genadievna's anxious face peeking out from behind his shoulder. Life hadn't prepared any of them for what came next, not for the fact that she spent the next hour methodically packing her mother-in-law's belongings into her suitcase, nor for the fact that she ordered a taxi to the train station, nor for the fact that she calmly informed her husband that if his mother didn't leave immediately, he would have to leave with her. "You can't do this," Inna Genadievna exclaimed. "Sergei, are you really going to let her treat your mother like this?" But Sergei, to her surprise, remained silent, glancing from his wife to his mother. For the first time in their marriage, Natalia saw an unfamiliar softness, confusion, and fear in his eyes. He had never seen her like this, so composed, resolute, and unyielding. "Inna Genadievna," Natalia stated, zipping up her mother-in-law's suitcase, "I respect you as my husband's mother, but this apartment is Sergei's and my home, which we are building together. You will always be a welcome guest, but only for durations that we agree upon in advance." Inna Genadievna coughed, her face flushing with indignation. "Sergei, do you hear what she's saying?" Sergei, however, made no move to defend his mother. He looked at Natalia with new eyes, as if seeing her for the first time. Her calmness and confidence disarmed him, stripping away his usual ground for manipulation. "Mom," he finally said. "Natasha is right. She and I need to live our own lives. I will take you to the station." Inna Gennadievna gasped, clutching her chest. "So that's it. I gave my whole life to you, and you're discarding me like an old rag." Natalia expected her husband's usual capitulation, but he merely sighed. "No one is discarding you. You can visit, but right now we need some time alone." Half an hour later, Natalia stood by the window, watching as her husband helped his mother into a taxi. She saw Inna Gennadievna speaking animatedly, gesturing wildly, while Sergei nodded wearily. Finally, the taxi pulled away. When her husband returned, they sat in the kitchen for a long time, talking. For the first time in months, they were truly conversing, not exchanging accusations. "I don't understand what came over me," Sergei confessed, staring into his mug. "When Mom arrived and started pointing out everything wrong in the house, I felt like I was 15 again. I couldn't contradict her." "And then you decided to put me out on the landing?" Natalia asked, surprised by her own composure. "I didn't decide. It just sort of happened. She was crying, saying you hated her, that she had nowhere to go. I got confused." He looked up at her. "Forgive me." "I never." Natalia raised a hand, stopping him. "It's not about forgiveness, Sergei. It's about us being a family, you and me. Your mother is a part of your life, and I respect that, but our home is our territory." That evening marked a turning point in their relationship. Sergei had to relearn how to be not his mother's son, but his wife's husband. It was a long, sometimes painful process, but each step on that path strengthened their bond. 2 years later, their lives were unrecognizable. Her relationship with Inna Gennadievna hadn't become perfect, but clear boundaries had been established. She visited for weekends every 2 months with advance notice and no longer attempted to dictate terms in their home. Natalia changed jobs for a more promising one with a flexible schedule. Sergei, inspired by her resolve, finally decided to open his own business, a small electronics repair company, something he had dreamed of for years. But the most significant change was the birth of their daughter, Polina. The pregnancy was unexpected but welcomed. When Natalia shared the news, Sergei wept with joy, and the next day began renovating the future nursery. Inna Gennadievna arrived a week after her granddaughter's birth. Natalia feared the return of old problems, but saw a completely different mother-in-law, touched and willing to help, but not to impose. "You know," Inna Gennadievna said, holding the sleeping Polina in her arms, "I never thought I would be grateful to you for that incident." Natalia raised an eyebrow questioningly. "When you turned off the lights and made me leave," her mother-in-law clarified. "I was so offended then. I didn't speak to Sergei for a whole month, and then I realized I had become the woman I always despised. My own mother-in-law. My mother-in-law ruined my first marriage. She constantly interfered, dictated, criticized, and I swore to myself that I would never be like that. And without noticing, I became even worse." Natalia didn't know what to say. She had never seen Inna Gennadievna so open and vulnerable. "Thank you for not turning away from Sergei after he treated you like that," her mother-in-law continued. "And thank you for finding the strength to forgive me. Not everyone could." "I love your son," Natalia replied simply. "And you are part of his life. We are a family, with all our complexities." That evening, as Inna Gennadievna retired to the guest room, Sergei embraced Natalia and whispered, "Every day, I thank fate that you didn't leave then, that you had the strength to fight for us. And I am thankful that you had the wisdom to understand." She smiled. 3 more years passed. Polina grew into a curious and energetic girl, and their family was blessed with a son, Kirill. Sergei's business prospered. Natalia worked remotely, balancing her career and family. Inna Gennadievna became an indispensable helper. She visited when asked, assisted with the children, but never overstepped the established boundaries. They learned to appreciate each other and find compromises. One evening, while tucking the children into bed, Natalia heard Polina ask her grandmother, "Grandma, why do you and Mommy get along so well? Vika from kindergarten says her mom and her mother-in-law always argue. Inna Gennadievna smiled and stroked her granddaughter's head. Because your mother once taught me a very important lesson. She showed me that love is not just tender feelings, but also respect for other people's boundaries. Later, after the children were asleep, the three of them sat in the kitchen, drinking tea and reminiscing. Now, with smiles, without resentment or bitterness. Remember when you cut the power at the electrical panel? Sergei laughed. I nearly died of fright. I was always afraid of the dark, and then to realize I had done something irreparable. And I thought you were going to strangle me, Natalia admitted. I wanted to, Inna Gennadievna said unexpectedly. At that moment, I hated you, but now I understand that it was the best moment in our relationship. All three laughed, realizing how long a journey they had traveled from that night with the lights out to their current peaceful family happiness. Later, after her mother-in-law went to bed and Sergei checked on the children, Natalia stood by the window, gazing at the night city. She recalled herself from 5 years ago, scared, bewildered, standing with a bouquet of camomiles before the locked door of her own apartment. Who could have imagined that that moment of despair would become the beginning of true strength and genuine happiness? Sergei embraced her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? About how sometimes you need to plunge into darkness to finally see the light, she replied, turning to her husband. Their lives had truly been unprepared for such happiness, but they built it themselves, step by step, day by day, transforming conflicts into lessons, mistakes into a foundation for something better and more real.